Good evening. My name is Thurman Greco, and the name of this show is Let's Live with Thurman Greco, and it's coming to you from scenic downtown Woodstock, New York, on Educational Channel 23. And it is also coming to you on YouTube. And we have a really interesting show this evening because in my heart of hearts, I really think the only person who could do this show was Gary Beedle, because Gary really has been in Woodstock all of his life and he is interested in things past. And so we're going to do the Woodstock show, and it's going to be in two parts this evening. And I'm really anxious that we're going to do, I'm looking forward to it. I'm happy that we're going to do it. People have been asking, and for those of you who do watch this show regularly or who do watch the show on YouTube, Gary's shows are always popular. Have you thought about that? They are always popular.
They seem to be.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
For whatever reason. We don't ask any reasons. We're grateful for this. So, Gary, would you like to start us off on this special production this evening?
Well, I find, and I'm sure you find too, when people come to the flea market, one of the first questions they ask was, where was the festival? And they just assume Woodstock Festival. And a lot of them were disappointed. It's like, no, it's 60 miles away from here. It was over in Bethel. But then you tell them, well, Dylan lived here, and Jimmy lived here, and Janis Joplin lived here, and, you run through the whole thing, and then you're kind of okay with it. But they don't understand how it got from here, which was where the inception of the festival actually started, all the way over to Bethel. So I think a good way to start is to talk about how it started up here first was Mike Lang. There was actually 4 producers. Everybody knows Mike. They say, oh, Mike Lang ran the whole thing. No, there was 4 people involved. Actually, it was Mike Lang, Artie Kornfeld, who was a vice president for Capitol Records out in New York City. He was in charge of, I think, artist development and finding new artists for Capitol. And then John Roberts and Joel Roseman, who were 2 young guys out of the city. And they had actually built a sound studio, Media Sound, in New York City. But Mike used to go to the sound outs. When he first moved up here, he was born in Bensonhurst, but moved to Florida, and he had a head shop down in Coconut Grove, and he actually did a concert in Florida, the 1968 Miami Sound Festival. He did, that was his first concert he ever produced. And then he moved up here, moved up to Woodstock, and started to go to the sound outs, which most of the locals know what the sound outs were, but anybody that's not familiar with Woodstock probably has never heard of the sound outs. They were held on Pan Copeland's farm, and she owned a little delicatessen in town called Ann's Delicatessen. And she had a farm out on Glasgow Turnpike, and actually a lot of the artists, when they first moved up here, they would live their commune style on her farm. Peter Max even lived there for a while. He lived there for a while. Some of Paul Butterfield's musicians lived there. A number of the artists that were in Cat Mother and the All Night News Boys, they lived there. And Cat Mother was the only band that Jimi Hendrix ever produced an album for. And so she started running these concerts there. I think it was Jocko Moffett was the name of the guy who came up with the idea to run the sound outs. So Mike would go to these sound out concerts, and these are some of the, these are not the original posters, but these are some of the posters that were posted around town for the sound out concerts.
Well, where were the sound out concerts held? And
it was between here and Saugerties on the Glasgow Turnpike. Actually, there's a map on here that shows that one and also this one here. So here's 28, here's 212, and you came to the 4 corners, and it was up in, you would turn to the right if you're heading towards Saugerties.
Well, what was the purpose of the sound out concerts?
Just to do concerts, just to get the musicians out and just to have a fun thing to do. And it was cheap to get in. I think on this one, which was the August 3rd, 31st, or it may show on that one. I don't know, right here. Ticket prices were $250 a day to get in. And they would run 3-day festivals. And I actually have, which I'm going to show right now, an original Sound Out concert ticket.
So were there a lot of Sound Out concerts?
They started in '67 and they ran from '67 to around '69. The last one they were going to do was 1970, and they had actually booked James Taylor to play that concert. But that was after Woodstock had happened, and Socrates got wind of, well, you got James Taylor and you're starting to book bigger acts, and they put mass gathering ordinances, so the James Taylor concert never came off, and that was about the last one.
They stopped it.
Yeah. And they did do some sound outs. Well, they changed the name too from sound outs to sound festivals. But they still, everybody referred to them as the sound outs. But,
Well, that's interesting. They changed it to festival. Festival is still a Woodstock word.
it is.
We people respond to festival.
But this is an original sound out ticket. This is not a copy. This is an original sound out ticket.
So, and it's been put in this.
Yeah, I put it in there. Just
for preservation.
And I
So
think that
if
was
you
for
went
this,
to a sound out, you got a ticket that was big like this.
Yeah. And I think the hole in it, when you went in, they punched the ticket.
Oh, okay. So that got you in.
But and I think that was probably, because I think the dates on that is 30th, 31st, and September 1st.
Yeah.
So that was the ticket for this particular sound out.
So for that sound out, you got 3 days of music for $2?
Yeah.
That's nice.
And Matt Sheehan, because John Maurer said, because I said, I don't know a lot of history about the sound outs, because I wasn't up here at that time. But he told me to go talk to Matt Sheehan, and you know Matt, that does the cutting boards.
Yeah.
And because he said Matt used to go to the sound outs, and I talked to Matt a couple of weeks ago, and he says he went to the sound outs. He says there was like a stone wall, and he remembers sitting there. And he said he also remembers helping bring in equipment, sound equipment, helping some of the musicians bring in the sound equipment. And I asked him, I said, I heard that it was a flatbed truck, and they just put platform. He says, no, there was an actual stage. After the first one, they did build an actual stage on the property to hold the concerts.
Well, now these were summer events, correct?
Yeah,
They
September,
were not
August,
in the winter.
August, September.
August and September, so they were held 2 months out of the year.
Yeah.
And they
That
were.
was August. This one was September. This one was August.
And they were on Glasgow Turnpike
On Pan Copeland's farm.
on the farm, and it was music and it was casual. So it was not the Woodstock Music Festival, but it was a music festival that was
Woodstock
popular.
festival in town here.
And do we have any idea how many people attended?
Well, I'm gonna. I don't know if it says here or not. This I found online, and the heading is Hippie Festival Upstate is cool amid the bonfires. Well, they're referring to the sound outs, they're not referring to the Woodstock Festival in '69. And as you see, it says Woodstock, New York, and I'll read it. I'll hold it up there for the camera to see. Okay. And this appeared in the New York Times, and I'm not sure what year. It was probably '67, '68 when that appeared. But so it starts Woodstock, New York, September 3rd, which probably coincides with this festival, since this was ended on the 1st.
Yes.
Says more than 1,000 hippies congregated in a small meadow about 3 miles east of this Ulster County art colony this weekend for a sound out, a festival of folk, rock, jazz, and blues music. Carrying sleeping bags and blankets, pitching tents, chopping wood, making bonfires, swirling their beads and jingling their bells, they quickly converted the field leased for the occasion into a form of gypsy camp. Many of the hippies, most of whom came from New York City, earned the $2.50 price of admission each day by performing such tasks as building a stage, fixing the lighting and sound equipment, clearing the field, and organizing traffic. We're basically country people tired of the city, calmer and more level-headed than those in the East Village, said 21-year-old Stephen Bishop, one of the organizers of the sound out.
Wow.
So that appeared in the New York Times in probably 1967, 68, referring to the sound outs, not the Woodstock.
So that's
Festival.
interesting. Does anybody ever come to town and come to the market and ask you about the sound outs?
There's local people that I've talked to about the sound outs.
So
that
this was
remember
really a
them.
local event.
But most of the tourists that come in never even heard of the sound outs. They
Okay,
don't know anything
so
about
the sound outs was really for the ones in the know.
Yeah, and the first ones, they tried to keep it on the down low, but then word started spreading and, you know.
Well, with
people started
1,000
coming.
people, you know,
Yeah.
you can't hide that too much.
And some of the people they had playing, actually, Richie Havens played the sound outs. You look at some of the names on here, you got Richie Havens, you got Tim Hardin, you got, they typed in Ron McLean, it's actually Don McLean, you know, American Pie.
Yeah,
Billy Baston, who was a local guy. So there was, Ramblin' Jack Elliott played it, Dave Van Ronk played it, I know he played it even though he's not on here. Jerry Jeff Walker,
Yeah.
who wrote Mr. Bojangles, he played
Yeah.
it. Scott Fagan, I mean,
so this was really, so that by the time the Woodstock Music Festival came around, they had already rehearsed this thing many times.
and this is
Because
what
the
they-
sound outs were each a rehearsal.
Yeah,
They really were.
well, it's what gave Mike Lang the idea to do
Right.
Woodstock on a grander scale. You know.
This was the precursor.
But he would go to the sound outs, hang out for the weekend. And they said that people would show up that didn't play. They said Bob Dylan showed up, he didn't play, but he was backstage listening, you know, to what was going on. Jimi Hendrix, Van Morrison, a lot of the people that were living up here. I think Van Morrison actually played one of the sound outs. But,
So because they were a little young at that point, they probably weren't ready. You know, didn't want to. Whatever.
well, Bob was up here since 63 or 64, so he'd been here for a while. Jimmy, I don't think, lived here that long. Janice didn't live here that long, but it was Albert Grossman that brought all those guys in. Yeah.
Right.
Of course, the band was here because Dylan brought them up. But 68, there was a lot of stuff going on in town. George Harrison actually came in 68 and spent Thanksgiving at Albert Grossman's. He stayed at Albert Grossman's and stayed with Bob and the band. And so there was a lot of people coming through town, a lot of big names. And I have a photo
So
here.
George Harrison came through. What happened to the others?
What do you mean the others?
Well, his buddies.
The other Beatles?
Yeah.
Well, George was a good friend of Bob's, and actually I think it was Robbie Robertson that got George to come over. And just, you know, the Beatles were having their problems in 68, 69, you know. They were having their issues as a band, and I think George just wanted to come and
Yeah.
just get away from it.
Yeah.
But I found, let's see if I can find the photo here. Somewhere.
Now, these are photos that you have collected yourself.
Yeah, I collect a lot of rock and roll memorabilia. But I found these last night online. And this would have been 1967 when the band was over in Sawgreaves with Bob doing the basement tapes. And I actually found some bootlegs online. Look who Bob is with in that photo. Tiny Tim.
Yeah.
You know, Tiptoe Through the Tulips.
Yes.
And I don't know if that was at Sawgreaves at the Big Pink, or if that was at Bob's house. But there he is with Tiny Tim.
And of course, Tiny Tim is no longer with
You
us.
know, and here's another one with Rick Danko, Richard Manuel, and it was
Tiny Tim.
taken at the same time because the couch is the same.
Yes.
So that's why I'm thinking it may have been at Big Pink that they did this.
Yeah.
But what I researched that a little bit last night, and Peter Yarrow was doing a documentary, and he filmed these guys, including Tiny Tim, for his documentary up here. And they said it's in part of the Basement Tapes archive, is those recordings are on the Basement Tapes.
So
The Tiny Tim.
in the 60s, you had the sound outs, and you had a lot of people living up here.
Oh, yeah.
You had people coming up from the city, but you had people living up here.
Yeah, as far as musicians and artists.
Yeah.
And
So that when people came to Woodstock, they would see on the sidewalk, they would see the people.
yeah, they'd see Rick Danko wandering around, or
Yeah.
whoever, John Sebastian. Or,
Well, you know, we have a lot of that now.
there is a lot, and I don't talk about who's living here because they don't want to be called out and say, oh, you know, so-and-so lives here, so-and-so lives there.
Right. And of course, I don't pay that much attention, but my daughter Jeanette is there on Saturdays now. And each Saturday she'll say, listen, Mother, there's so-and-so, and there's so-and-so. And she said, they're running around. They don't want anybody to know they're here. And I said, that's right.
And usually they come in early in the morning. And,
right.
You know.
Before the crowds. And the crowds wouldn't know anyway.
Yeah. A few years ago, I don't know if you remember John Sheeran, who used to sell next to me, used to sell the cigar boxes with the art.
Oh, yes.
And he passed away, unfortunately. Yes. I'm sure you know the story of that. But one day I was set up next to him, and this guy comes in, he has a big hat on, and he's quite tall, and he has a T-shirt on that says, I love James Taylor. And he's talking to John. I'm looking at this guy. I'm looking at the guy, and John's talking to him and talking about the boxes and stuff. And the guy walks away, and he looks towards me, and then he keeps walking. I said, John, do you know who that was you were just talking to? He said, I don't know, some guy that was interested. I said, John, that was James Taylor you were talking to. I said, get out of here. He says, why would he wear an I love James Taylor shirt if he's James Taylor? I said, so people wouldn't think, oh, that's James Taylor. Who would be that? To wear?
That was part of his
disguise.
Disguise. That's a very interesting thing. We see that every Saturday and Sunday in the flea market. We see those disguises.
Yeah.
I have a grandchild who is music and artistic, and he has begun to develop a following. And when he goes out, he is in disguise.
Yeah.
And to me, he's just a kid, out there, and he's not yet, known by everyone. But when he just wants to enjoy himself, nobody knows who he is.
Yeah.
And he does that with intent.
Yeah.
And we had last weekend a woman whose name I will not say. We had a woman and her child, and they were just running around having the best.
Yeah.
And that's one of the draws to Woodstock.
Yeah.
And everybody comes to Woodstock, and they don't,
Yeah.
which is good.
Yeah. No, there's a local artist that's in town here that's got quite a following, lives in a pretty famous house here, that comes in and hangs out at the booth and, talks and, but, you don't call them out and say, oh, so-and-so is here. You tell your family or whatever, I seen so-and-so or whatever, but, there's a lot that come through.
If you start telling, they'll quit coming.
Yeah.
So we have to enjoy what we enjoy.
Yeah. I appreciate the conversations. And
yeah.
Well, Olga said to John Mayer one time, she says, well, I didn't grow up around like this. I lived in Russia growing up. And she says, how do we react if we know it's somebody? He said, you treat them just like everybody else. If they want to talk about their music, they'll bring it up. You don't go up and say, oh, can I do a selfie or, whatever.
That's kind of cruel.
We've had a number of them through the years. David Bowie actually came through the flea market years ago before he passed. And I was set up along the fence line, and I didn't even realize until a couple years later. But I don't know the man's name, but it was when the whole fracking thing was going on, and he had a booth against fracking. And this guy came in, and I remember because he told me afterwards, quite tall, red hair, he had a red beard, and he wore a hat, and he was looking at my stuff, and then he was talking to this fellow, again, I don't even remember his name, I see him at the market, he stops and talks, but he was talking to him about the anti-fracking. And when he left, he says, do you know who that was looking at your stuff and was talking to me? I said, I don't know. So it was David Bowie. But Bowie put a fake red beard on and, the hat disguising his, but he stood there talking about fracking. And,
that was his disguise.
So, but, so the sound outs, so Mike went to the sound outs. As far as Artie, the way Mike and Artie hooked up, Mike was managing a band called Train, and he was looking for a recording contract for them to try to get them signed up to a contract. So he called up Artie's office in New York and talked to the secretary. He says, I'd like an appointment with Artie Kornfeld. He says, I want to discuss a band with him. And she said, well, who are you? He says, I'm Mike Lang. And he says, just tell Artie I'm from the neighborhood, because Artie grew up in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn also. So the woman goes in and she says, there's a guy out there named Mike Lang, and he says he's from the neighborhood. So Artie says, well, I don't know Mike Lang. He says, but if he's from the neighborhood, send him on in. So Mike goes in and he's telling about the band Train that he was looking to get a recording contract for, and they hit it off. He said him and Mike and Artie and the two of them, they really hit it off. And Mike started to tell him about Woodstock and these concerts that they have up here, these sound out concerts, and how he was thinking about building a recording studio up here. That was before Albert did his studio out there in Bearsville. And he said, I think we need, because we have Dylan and we have the band and we have all these artists, I think we need a country recording studio. And he says, I've been thinking about doing this concert, maybe to finance, raise money to do build a recording studio up there. So Artie became interested in it, and they started hanging out and throwing the idea back and forth, but they needed a backer. So John and Joel, who had already done media sound studios in the city, they put an ad, I forget if it's the New York Times or the New York Post, one of the New York City, and John Roberts, he was I forget what his mother, she had passed away, but they had money from corporate. It was like a detergent company or something. He had inherited about $1 million. And they were looking to invest, so they put an ad in the paper, young men with capital looking for investments. So Mike and Artie got in touch with them, and they met up down in the city, and Mike says, it was a totally different vibe. John and Joel were very straight, and Artie and Mike were, the more hippie, bohemian type guys. But they hooked up and they described what they wanted to do up here. So they signed up, and the company they formed was called Woodstock Ventures. And that's why they kept the name Woodstock all through all the incarnations of where they ended up being, even though they didn't end up having it here. They kept the name Woodstock Ventures, and Mike said it was always going to be Woodstock because of that natural, earthy, country vibe of what he was going for. So they looked for land up here, and John Maurer said they actually looked out near where the Como, where the Historical Society is. They looked land up there, they looked, kind of fell through. But they did look at Winston Farms, where they ended up having it in '94, the 25th anniversary that they had at Winston Farms. It was a sausage man that had a sausage company, and he owned that land and a lot of other land around, and they thought they had that nailed down to do it at Winston Farms. But when Sawgrease heard about it, and town of Woodstock heard about it, and the number of people that were coming in, all of a sudden the lawyers from the sausage guy stopped responding to their calls. So eventually they got in touch with him, and he kind of backed out. So now they were signing acts. They'd signed Creedence for about $10,000. That was their first act that they'd signed. I think Joan Baez signed for $12,000. I don't know how far along in the process, but they'd signed her. They signed the Dead. They signed, they were signing acts, but they had no place to hold the concerts. So Joel and John went out looking one day, and they were driving up Route 17, which is down by me, down in Orange County, and they seen advertisement, a billboard for rental of industrial park. It was Howard Mills was the owner of the property, and they wrote down the number, pulled off, called them, went to look at it. And actually, this is a photo of the Wallkill site.
Oh my goodness, that's beautiful.
But as you see, it's very flat.
Yes.
There's no sloping ground, and it was an industrial park that he was looking to develop. So they called Mike, and they put a retainer down, I think $1,500. I forget how much he wanted to rent for they needed it for 12 weeks to develop the property and actually have the concert there. And Mike went down and looked at it. He wasn't thrilled at all, but they were running out of time to do this. So they agreed to do it. And what happened was, it was actually almost in my aunt's backyard. It was in Scotchtown, which is a vicinity in Middletown, New York. It's within walking distance of my aunt's property. And my other aunt had a mink ranch off of Route 17. And I remember, I was 11 years old at the time, seeing the young kids and the tie-dye and the hippies and the buses and the VWs and a lot of hitchhikers, because back in the day, nobody cared if you hitchhiked. It's not now Like today, you never see a hitchhiker. But I remember seeing all these people coming into the town of Wallkill to work on that site. But when word got out of what it was actually going to be, because they were advertising it as an arts and craft fair, they were toning down the music aspect of it. And a lot of people in the town of Wallkill, they got wind of what it was actually going to be and how many people were coming in. And they started going to the town board meetings, complaining about it. And 1 month out before the festival, town of Wallkill pulled the plug. They put
Wow.
in again, a mass gathering ordinance of no more than, I think, 5,000 people, and they were telling them, you know, there's gonna be at least 50,000 coming in over the 3-day period, which turned into 500,000 people, but, so Wallkill was getting lawsuits, you know, you're gonna have this thing, it's in my backyard, and so they'd already started developing, putting water in, developing the stage, clearing the land. All of a sudden, they're without a site again. So, what ended up happening is, and there's different stories how Max Yasgur got involved, but Mike said they were flying over and looking for land and going by helicopter. They got hooked up with Max, and Mike went up, looked at the land, seen the sloping field, and he knew that was where it had to be, and they worked a deal. I think it was somewhere between $50,000 and $75,000 they rented the field for. But
And where was that field?
Bethel, New York, over in White Lake, right? You get off at Route 17 at the Monticello racetrack and just follow 17B in, and it's at the corner of Hurd and West Shore Drive. But
Well, now, how upset were the people in Bethel?
actually, a lot of the people around there were upset. They actually they took an old tabletop and they put no hippie gathering at Max's farm, don't buy Max's milk. I think the table they have, it's on display at Bethel Woods at the museum there. But the town board gave them the okay to go along with it. And
Do you know why?
I think Max had a lot of pull in the community because he was the largest milk producer in the area. And he just talked to them, and I think Mike and some of his promoters and people he had working went in and talked to them and explained what they wanted to do, and they ended up going along with it.
Wow.
But a lot of people up here, well, this, actually, everybody knows this poster, which was the original poster. That was Arnold Slotnick designed that poster, and that was the poster for the Bethel site. However, this was the original Wallkill poster when they were still going to be down in Wallkill, New York at this site.
That's interesting.
And if you look, it says Wallkill, New York on the poster.
Yes. So if they had wanted to, they could have kept this poster. They already paid for the artwork and everything.
What they ended up doing when they had the festival in Bethel, they ended up selling those posters really cheaply because they had a bunch of them, and they sold them cheaply just as, you know, to whoever wanted to buy one. My cousin Penny, who actually attended the concert, her and her husband Frank, they got one of the posters. I don't know if they got it for free, if they bought it. And she's down in South Carolina, her house, she has it hung on her wall framed. And they're worth quite a bit of money, original ones now.
Because they really are lovely.
But there was very little information on it.
Right.
Where this poster listed all the players and all the artists, but artistically, this is a much more artistic
Yeah,
poster.
that's a lovely.
And it was two different artists. David Bird did this poster, and he did all the posters for the Fillmore East, and he did a lot of stuff for Broadway. So he was the artist that did this one. They couldn't get a hold of him when they needed another poster, so they got a man named Arnold Slotnick, who did the more famous one that everybody knows.
Well, this is lovely because this is, you know, there've been a million T-shirts, you know, that have the red T-shirt and the.
But from
pieced
an
up and-
artistic poster, I think this one's
That
much
is
more
just
artistic.
gorgeous, beautiful.
So word got around that, you know, they're going to do this concert, and everybody up here, they're worried because the name is still connected with Woodstock, and they're worried that people are going to be influxing Woodstock, and there was already people coming into Woodstock looking for the quote-unquote famous musicians that they knew lived here. And this photo, I don't know when it's from, probably 68, 67, 69. this is the center of town here with what was going on with people coming into town up here at that time.
You know, Woodstock still doesn't want the music.
No, I know they gave the colony a hard time. And,
They're still giving the call. As far as I can tell, they're giving everybody a hard time.
But I found this. Ed Sanders did a article, and it's up online last year about how, the connection of the Woodstock Village here and the Woodstock Festival. And I pulled this from his article, and in his article it said this postcard was sent out to residents of the village here for fear of, the influx. People were saying, well, the people are going to come here. And the postcard says, "Dear sir, this is an answer to your recent letter. There is no music festival to be held in Woodstock, contrary to some reports. The so-called Woodstock Music and Art Fair has been scheduled at Bethel, Sullivan County, New York, for August 15th, 16th, and 17th, over 60 miles from Woodstock, Ulster County. There are no public campgrounds in Woodstock. There are no public swimming pools in Woodstock. There is limited motel accommodations in Woodstock. Woodstock, New York Township Chamber of Commerce." And Ed found that somewhere in the archives, the historical archives, and put that into his article.
You could change a few words and this would be,
Pertinent to today?
yeah, this could work for today. There are no hotels, there's only expensive Airbnbs, and there are no public campgrounds, and there really are not. I know that, Woodstock doesn't want those things. They want to have their families, and they want to live in peace, and that's it.
But one of the famous people that lived here at the time, the summer of Woodstock, was Jimi Hendrix, and he lived over in Boyceville on Traverse Hollow Road is where he lived, actually. And these are a couple pictures of him rehearsing outside at the Traverse Hollow Road residence.
How long did he
Just
live
one
in
summer,
Boyceville?
I believe.
Just one summer.
Yeah, summer of '69. And I have a cool audio to describe what that is of Jimi. And this is also from the Boyceville house. And my cousin, her husband at the time, worked at a gas station in New Paltz. And he was working there, and this guy pulls up, black man with a big afro, and pulls up in a pickup truck, an old beat-up pickup truck, and he says, "Oh, would you fill up the tank?" So he's pumping the gas, and he's looking, through the back window of the car, and he said, "The guy looks awful familiar." He goes around, and it was Jimi Hendrix. And he had nothing to get an autograph. I says, "Oh, can I get your autograph?" So he pulled out a matchbook cover, and Jimi signed it for him, and he signed it, "Stay free, Jimi Hendrix." But over the years, he lost the matchbook cover. But he pumped gas for Jimi Hendrix in New Paltz.
A lot of the people who came to Woodstock during these times, they stayed. They stayed. They stayed in Kingston. They stayed in Saugerties. They stayed. It seemed to me that when we first came here at the beginning of 2000, that the businesses were owned and managed by a lot of these people.
Yeah.
And I think by now they've sold.
Or people connected
Yeah.
to them. But I have a sound clip, and Richard Hepner, who you know from the Historical Society, Debbie's
Yes.
husband, he tells the story of, it's the Tinker Street Cinema now, but it was a church back in the day. And Richard's family lived next to the church. So one evening, 1 week before the Woodstock Festival, I think it was August 10th actually, his father's sitting in the living room around 8 o'clock or so, and he hears all this noise coming from the church. And Richard's in the house, and he says to him, "What the hell is that noise coming from the church?" Well, it was Jimi Hendrix rehearsing 1 week before the Woodstock Festival, and these pictures were taken inside the church of Jimi, and I'll play it. It's about 3 minutes long. You want to play the whole
Sure.
thing?
Let's see how it
And what
goes.
he's rehearsing, you can find it on YouTube. There's a whole 40-minute bootleg of him rehearsing in the Tinker Street Cinema, which was the church at the time.
Really?
But what I'm going to play, because everybody at the festival thought that it was an impromptu thing, when he did the Star Spangled Banner at the festival. This is him rehearsing the Star Spangled Banner in the church right on Tinker Street here, 1 week before the Woodstock Festival, and we can put these up as the thing is playing. I have 2 more
Okay.
photos of it. And I think the sound volume should be okay on this one, Ellen. So that's Jimmy playing an unconventional version of Star Spangled Banner. It's in the church right on the main street here. Yeah, if anybody wants to hear the whole thing, there's a YouTube. If you just go on YouTube and type in Hendrix Tinker Street Rehearsal, it'll bring up.
And there it is.
It's a whole 40 minutes of his rehearsal. And there's also, from the Show Can House over in Boyceville, there's actually a lot of recordings online that he rehearsed when he lived in Boyceville. I think there's like 3 CDs worth of stuff from him rehearsing up there. And that's all on YouTube also, if anybody wants to check that out.
And he was not even there that long.
No.
So he was a real worker.
Yeah. And when he first moved up here, he lived, Mike Jeffries was his manager, and I think Mike Jeffries lived over by the Bird Cliff, up where Dylan lived on that road. And when he first moved up here, he lived over Mike Jeffries' garage for a short period of time, just He had no place to go. He lived in his room. I guess he had a little room up over his garage, and that's where Jimmy lived until he moved out by Boyceville. So they were all over. They moved different locations. But I have a cool thing I want to show. And Barry, who sells the records, who you know from the flea market, Barry, right on the corner, he loaned me this record because there's a photo that I wanted to show in it. And it's a Elliot Landy photo of the band. And actually, it has a connection to somebody that we both know and love. So, on the inner gatefold, it's this photo right here. I'm going to hold it up so Ellen can zoom in on this one.
And who is that?
So, Ellen, this photo here in the top corner, if you can get in on that one. The one with the two musicians in the bedroom there. Okay, so that is Robbie Robertson and Levon Helm. But there's significance to where that photo was taken. That photo was taken out by Xena, and Rick Danko had rented that house for the band to rehearse in and whatever. And that was, I think that was after the festival. That photo may have been taken, because I think this album came out in 1970, but the photo may have been taken in 69. So the house is out by Xena, and the house belonged to Janine Maurer. Janine Maurer grew up in that house. The bedroom that they're rehearsing in was Janine's childhood bedroom.
Oh my goodness. It's a small, small world.
So Janine has a connection to that photo in this album.
Now, is this album for sale?
This is Barry's.
Okay.
Barry loaned it to me so I could...
Okay.
And I think he does. He had a price on it, but if you want any vintage rock and roll stuff, shop with Barry, and Barry has a lot of history too of this area, because he hung out with a lot of these guys back in the day. But I thought that was a really interesting thing to find out when Janine had told me the band rehearsed at her old childhood home, and said there's a picture of it, and I found the picture, so that's it. But and since we're talking about Janine, we'll bring up another photo here. And Bill Lubinsky, he was a dealer of John's for years, but he also had a connection to Mike Lang. He was with management when the festival was going on. And Bill, and I want to bring up a quote, because Bill got quoted in this Life magazine. I'm going to read the quote. I'll find the quote in there. But Bill sold at John and Janine's flea market for a long time. He's passed away now, but he would sell Woodstock memorabilia.
Oh, really?
Yep, out at the field. So this is Bill Lubinsky. This is John Maurer right here. Janine, back in the day. The man kneeling is Robert Reynolds, who Janine said was a local artist at the time. And the two children is Colleen, who you know and I know, and their son Alan.
Wow.
And that was circa 1979 when that picture was taken. And after we do the show tonight, I told Janine I'm going to give her that photo.
That's sweet of you.
But she's the one who sent me the image of it. But we'll leave that up while I read Bill Lubinsky's quote, because Bill Lubinsky was with Mike Lang, and I just have to find what page it's on. It's on page 34. And he got quoted in Life magazine for the 25th anniversary, and it says, Bill Lubinsky, Woodstock, New York, building contractor, Woodstock memorabilia dealer. So Bill says, I was with the management, and by Friday I really wanted a good bath. So at 4 in the morning we chartered a helicopter. We took off, and after about 10 minutes I could still see campfires below us. I thought, wow, the people are spread out this far. Then I realized that we're not moving. I crawled up into the seat next to the pilot, a 19-year-old, very straight, from Liberty, New York. Someone must have spiked the pilot's Kool-Aid with acid, and he doesn't know it. He's grooving. He says, this is really nice. I had to talk him into Grossinger's Hotel. We landed, and I said, are you okay? He says, oh yeah, I'm fine. When we came out of our room a half hour later, he was still sitting there with the rotors going around on the chopper.
Wow. Woo!
But Yeah, could you imagine flying in a helicopter with somebody on acid?
Yeah, well, no, thank you.
But there's another photo in here, and I asked Janine if they remember this person, and they didn't. And she apparently had a store in town here, because they mention it in the article, and it was on page 43. So this woman here, I'll hold it up so the camera can get it. Her name was Robin Halleck, and I don't know if she still lives in town or not. It's this lady right here at the Woodstock Festival. And in the little write-up about her, it says, Robin Halleck, known as Blue, a very special and cosmic name to me. Halleck collects mementos of the festival she considers the high point of her life. She has a business called Dreams Come True in Woodstock, New York. Now I asked John and Janine if they remember that store, but they said they don't remember it, but it had to be somewhere here in the town. And it must have been like a antique type place, because she says, I go to dumpsters, climb into dumpsters with my flashlight, root through stuff, and find treasures. She explains. My daughter Chelsea Iyer is into it too. So it must have been like a little thrift shop, gift shop, antique shop.
Yeah.
But it was called Dreams Come True in Woodstock, New York. But Robin, if you're still around town, come on into the market and tell us the history. But,
And visit with us.
But the picture was taken by Bill Epridge, who was a Life magazine photographer. And one of his most famous photographs was at the Bobby Kennedy, when Bobby Kennedy won the California primary. He took the famous shot of Bobby Kennedy walking into the kitchen after he had been assassinated, laying on the floor.
Wow.
He took that. He took that famous shot of Bobby Kennedy after he'd been shot. So he took some pretty historical photos in the day for Life magazine. But, another famous local couple, not from Woodstock, but just down by Pine Bush. And unfortunately, the lady in the photo passed away back in March, but it's an iconic Woodstock photo from the album cover of Nikki and Bobby Erkeline. And this is a well-known photo from the Woodstock album cover of Nick and Bobby, and the photo below is what they looked like 20 years after. But I want to read something from Bobby's obituary just to show the lasting impact that Woodstock had on some of the people that went to the festival. And I printed that out the other day. She passed away in March. So it's just a paragraph or two. And it says, she lived by her motto, be kind. While working at Pine Bush Elementary, Bobby started and maintained a food pantry that was always stocked for anyone in need, and now lives on at the high school. She created a holiday project that fed and ensured that 125 families in need celebrated gifts for all, including turkeys for Thanksgiving and complete meals for Easter and Passover holidays. If a single mom in need needed her car repaired in order to work, Bobby found a mechanic to repair the vehicle. She would find fuel oil for families that had no heat because they ran out of fuel and had no money to fill their oil tanks. Bobby always convinced the businesses to donate their services for free. She lived by her words of, how much do you need if you already have everything you need? Why not give? Bobby was also known for being the better half with her husband Nick as the couple on the cover of the 1969 Woodstock album cover. And I know they volunteered at Bethel Woods. They would go in and volunteer and tell people stories of being at Woodstock and their time there and the photograph. But she said it. Woodstock. She's been quoted in different articles and different interviews that she gave over the years that Woodstock had a lasting impact on her, both her and her husband. That you give back.
That really. Family lives on in family with this. That's a very important thing in Woodstock. I mean, Woodstock's got a lot that's not perfect, but this is something that's worth honoring. Yeah. It's lovely.
I'm sure everybody, they were known for being on the Woodstock cover, but I'm sure their kids, lived that way too. And,
Yeah.
Yeah, she passed away back in March, but she was well known down the Pie Bush area as being the lady on the Woodstock cover. It's like, but, we're getting up to the point where I start talking about some of my family members and friends that were there, so we might as well show the photo on the cover of Life magazine. So this photo was in the Life magazine that came out in '69, but this Life magazine's the 25th memorial issue, if you want to call it that. So there's a few people on there from the town that I knew and one relative of mine. So my cousin Barbara, who actually was with my cousin Brian for years, but she's been in the family 50 years, so she's cousin Barbara after 50 years, right?
Yeah.
So one of her boyfriends, Tommy Maroney, is here in the orange. And then his brother Mo is down here with the brown shirt with his arms raised. And my cousin, who my mom and his mom were first cousins, so we were like second cousins. Eddie Bacon is right here. This photo right here, that's Eddie. And Eddie's a house painter, and me and Barbara have gone back and forth on this. Eddie always told me that he was one of the ones up on the towers when they were announced, come down from the towers. And Barbara says, I don't think so. And I said, Eddie told me he was one of the ones on the towers. So she said, well, I'm going to have to check with Eddie. But I told her, he was a house painter. He's still a house painter. He knows how to climb scaffolding, so it makes sense that he would have been one up on the towers. But, there's a few other ones in the photo there that from our town. But Eddie, yeah, and that's Eddie's claim to fame. Yeah, I made the cover of Life magazine. We still hear about it to this day. So my cousin Barbara, her babysitter worked for Max. Her and her husband, Marge McAdams, John McAdams. They were farmers. They worked for Max. And actually, it might be a good time to look at our little thing back here that I brought. So this is where the stage was. The barn over here is where Marge and John lived. There was like a little house over here too, because Max had little houses around the farm for his regular, farmers and workers, employees. So this barn here led up to where the hog farm was. And Barbara worked for the phone company back in '69, and she said, I need a couple days off to go to Woodstock. They told her, no, you can't have days off. We need you to work here at the farm, at the phone company. She got up and just walked out and went to Woodstock.
Anyway, oh wow.
Well, they were given tickets. John and Marge were given tickets by Max because Michael had given a lot of tickets to Max to give out to friends and family, whoever. So Barbara had tickets, but she said they didn't need them because it was a free concert. So she stayed the whole weekend with Marge and John down here at the barn, and she remembers a lot of stuff. She said, when I found this, she said she couldn't remember how they went in because there were so many people, but she said she remembers going and turning to the right. So I said, you had to come down from 17B, you must have came down Bird Road, turned here, because she said the hog farm was up above them. So we found it, and she said, yep, that's where we stayed, at Marge's and John's little house that they had near the barn here. Because she said she remembers them bringing a lot of kids that were tripping on the bad acid up to the hog farm, because the hog farm did all the medical for the ones that were tripping on the bad acid because they had experience with that. Barbara said she remembers going over to the stage and hearing Jimmy Monday morning. She remembers walking over there and hearing Joan Baez, which I have some clips of, which we'll play in a little bit. But she said John McAdams gave out water. They still had to work the farm. He still had to milk the cows and do the farm work all while the concert was going on, because the farm had to function as a farm.
Right.
Too, because this wasn't the only land that Max owned.
Right. The animals have to be fed, the cows have to be milked.
But she said after he would do all that, he would come back because it was really hot and people were becoming dehydrated.
Wow.
And kids were wandering around. She said John spent most of the weekend giving out water just from the barn, just handing water to kids. And she said her and Marge got mad at him because he was so tired from working the farm all day. And now but she said he stayed out there.
He had no choice.
He gave water to the kids just handed water to the kids all.
Yeah, and the barns had to be cleaned and all those, everything had to
Yeah,
go.
the farm
It
had
all
to
goes
function.
on,
Yeah, the farm
yeah.
had to function. But this is my cousin Barbara. And a quick little side note on why she's on crutches. In my first show, I had mentioned how Barbara got me going and doing the antiques and stuff back in the early 70s. But she was into the antiques and doing that stuff too. But she was at a Harley Davidson convention selling Beanie Babies because she was really into the whole Beanie Baby craze when that was going on. And she broke her foot. So I said to her the other day when she sent me that picture, I said, why the crutches? What'd you do to your foot? She said, well, I broke it. And she says, I was at the convention, so I had to get a black cast because I was at a Harley Davidson convention, so I needed the black cast. But that's Barbara, and this is Marge McAdams, of course, not years later. And she was Barbara's babysitter. Her and John lived on the farm, and Marge actually babysat for Barbara's son, Jim. And after they left the farm, and I guess John passed away, Marge moved in with Barbara and my cousin Brian, and I remember Marge living with them for years. And the one thing I remember about Marge is she loved to go to Wednesday night bingo at the Catholic Church.
That was
She
her
big-
favorite
Her
thing?
big thing was playing bingo. She always, I don't want to miss bingo, but yeah, they worked the farm. They lived on the farm, and Barbara spent 3 days on the farm with them. So, but Barbara said one thing she remembers about the hog farm, because Barbara had nothing but good things to say about the hog farm and Wavy Gravy and Hugh Romney and the whole thing with hog farm. She remembers grapes. And I said, grapes? She said, yeah, the hog farm, all the hog farmers were handing out grapes. And she said she felt a little bad about taking them because they were going back to the house and eating a meal every night. And but I got thinking, grapes have liquid in them, so
Yeah.
they probably were handing the grapes out to keep people hydrated.
Yeah,
You know?
anything for hydration.
But she said she remembers that. And they did have a free stage up here also, because that was the thing with Mike. So we're going to have the stage here, but we're going to have a free stage also. And a lot of people played the free stage. Joan Baez, after she played her set here,
Went
walked
over
over there
there.
and did an hour on the free stage also.
Oh, that's cute.
But Barbara remembers a lot because she said she walked up there to see what was the whole thing that was going on with the hog farm. She remembers more about the hog farm than she does what was going on in this part of the field. But she
Wow.
said the sound, the acoustics were great. So even way over here, she could hear everything that was going on over there.
Oh,
The
wow.
sound really was. But so these are a few photos. This is constructing the towers and constructing, just building the whole infrastructure on the site.
Was this for the,
This is for Bethel. We're over in Bethel.
so
now.
this is what they had to do? Oh, wait, we got 2 minutes.
Oh, we're almost out of time already?
Listen,
We
hey,
haven't even touched the surface.
thank you very much, Ellen. Thank you.
Thanks,
And
Ellen.
thank you, and we'll come back for the second session. Okay, hang in there for the next session, people. This has been great fun.
Crap, we haven't covered that.
Thank you very much, Ellen.
Thanks, Alan.